There are places in this world that seem ordinary to anyone passing by, until you stop, until you step inside, until you realize you've crossed a threshold you can't return from. This is one of those places. It's not marked on any GPS, no map leads to it, and no matter how far you drive, it's always at the end of the road. People have whispered about it for years. A McDonald's that isn't supposed to exist. A glowing beacon in the dead of night that calls to the lost, the hungry, and the hopeless. They say it appears only to those who need it most, or those the road wants to keep. The story begins on a night when the rain never seemed to stop, when the streetlights barely held back the darkness, and when a lonely driver found himself staring at the golden arches that should not have been there. The rain hit the windshield in rhythmic slaps, blurring the world into streaks of orange and gray. The wipers worked furiously, but the fog crept in from the edges of the glass as though the night was breathing against it. The driver had been on the road for hours, following a highway that seemed endless, yet the exits never led anywhere useful, just empty service roads and closed gas stations. Hunger gnawed at him, deeper than just the need for food. It was the kind of hollow ache that made your head light and your thoughts slow. His fuel gauge hovered near empty. His phone had been dead for an hour, and the last sign of civilization was a flickering motel neon many miles back. Then, through the mist and rain, a warm glow appeared ahead. At first, it seemed like another hallucination of fatigue, but as he drove closer, the unmistakable shape of the McDonald's arches rose out of the darkness, bathed in an inviting yellow that cut through the storm. It was strange, though. There was no parking lot, no other cars, no nearby roads leading in or out. Just the two glowing arches, a squat building beneath them, and a narrow driveway curling in like an invitation. He slowed down, feeling an uneasy relief, as though this was a gift he didn't deserve but couldn't refuse. The building looked different. The McDonald's logo was old, not the sleek modern design of today. The sign over the door had peeling paint, and the word "open" in red neon buzzed faintly, sometimes flickering out before blinking back to life. The rain seemed to lessen as he pulled in, replaced by a strange quietness, as though the car had entered a bubble of stillness. Even the air smelled different, like warm fries, old grease, and something faintly metallic. Inside, the lights glowed dimly, casting a golden hue over everything. The tiled floor was wet, but not from rain. It looked like condensation, tiny beads of water forming and dripping slowly. The air was warmer than outside, almost too warm, like walking into a room where the heat had been left on for days. Behind the counter stood a single figure, dressed in an outdated McDonald's uniform, the colors faded, the name tag too worn to read. Their face was pale, eyes fixed in an unblinking stare, lips curved into a polite, unmoving smile. "Welcome to McDonald's," they said, voice soft but flat, as though reading from a script they'd repeated countless times. "What can I get you tonight?" The driver glanced at the menu overhead. It was strange. All the items listed were familiar, yet slightly wrong. The Big Mac was listed as Big Meal Sandwich, the fries were potato cuts, and instead of soda, the drinks menu read Sweet Liquid and Bitter Liquid. The prices were in numbers, but no currency symbol. Something about the food photos made his stomach twist. They looked too real, like the photographer had captured not staged meals, but actual food that had been sitting there for days. Still, hunger overpowered hesitation. He ordered a simple burger and fries. The cashier didn't type anything into a register, There was no register at all, just nodded, turned away, and disappeared into a doorway behind the counter. The moment they left, the quiet became heavier, as though the air itself was pressing against his ears. In the silence, he thought he could hear faint sounds coming from the back. Sizzling. Yes, but also something else. Like low voices speaking in a language he didn't recognize, and the wet sound of something being pulled apart. When the cashier returned, they set the tray down in front of him. The burger was wrapped in plain wax paper. No logo, no branding, just a faint grease stain bleeding through. The fries were in a small paper bag, crumpled at the top. The smell was intoxicating, rich and savory, yet something about it made the hair on the back of his neck rise. He sat at one of the booths, the red vinyl seat cracked and peeling, the table sticky even though it looked clean. The first bite was heavenly, too heavenly. The flavors were rich, deep, almost overwhelming. The texture was perfect, every chew releasing more taste than seemed possible. He devoured the burger in minutes, then moved to the fries, which were crisp, yet somehow melted in his mouth. But as he ate, he noticed something strange. The warmth of the food didn't fade. Even after several minutes, the fries felt fresh from the fryer, almost pulsing with heat. When he finished, he leaned back, an odd heaviness settling in his limbs. He realized the air felt thicker now, and the buzzing of the lights seemed louder. Looking around, he noticed something else. There were other people in the restaurant, though he hadn't seen them come in. They sat alone at various tables, eating silently, their movements slow and deliberate. None of them looked up. None of them blinked. Their skin was pale, almost waxy, and their clothes seemed outdated, like they'd been here a very long time. The driver tried to stand, but his legs felt weak. The cashier was watching him now, that fixed smile never faltering. "Would you like dessert?" they asked, the words feeling more like a command than a question. He shook his head, mumbled something about leaving, and made for the door. But when he stepped outside, the rain was gone. The air was perfectly still, and the road beyond the driveway wasn't there. Instead, the parking lot seemed to stretch into a dark, endless field, the horizon swallowed in shadows. The golden arches behind him glowed brighter now, casting long, unnatural shadows that reached toward him like fingers. He turned back to the building, and the door was closed. Through the glass, the inside looked empty. No cashier, no customers, no lights. Just the faint outline of the counter in the dark. A whisper drifted on the still air, too soft to make out at first. Then it grew clearer, a chorus of voices repeating the same phrase over and over. The end of the road is never the end. His car was still in the lot, but when he tried to start it, the engine wouldn't turn over. The keys felt warm in his hand, almost burning. He looked up, and in the distance, where the horizon had been moments ago, he saw shapes moving. Tall, thin silhouettes walking toward the McDonald's, their heads bent at unnatural angles, their limbs too long, swaying as they moved. The golden arches pulsed once like a heartbeat. The whispers grew louder, and the driver realized that whatever this place was, it hadn't just fed him. It had taken something from him in return. The driver sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles ached, his breath coming in short, uneven bursts. The silhouettes in the distance moved with an unsettling rhythm, their bodies jerking slightly with every step, as though they were being pulled forward by invisible strings. They were far enough that their faces, or what might have been faces, were still hidden in shadow, but their height was wrong. their proportions off in ways that made the stomach twist. He tried the ignition again. Nothing. Only the faint sound of the key grinding in the lock and the strange low hum that seemed to seep from the golden arches behind him. That sound hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had, and he was only now aware of it. A deep, vibrating tone that sank into his bones and made the air feel heavy, as though gravity itself had increased. His phone lay on the passenger seat, still dead. He pressed the power button, knowing it was pointless. But instead of the normal blank screen, faint shapes flickered against the black. Ghostly images, fragments of faces, flashes of places he didn't recognize. Then a word appeared in dim red letters. Eat. It stayed for only a second before the screen went completely black again. The silhouettes drew closer. He could see now that their movements were not entirely their own. Their heads twitched sharply every few steps, as though responding to some unheard command. Their limbs bent oddly at the joints, some bending in ways they should not be able to bend at all. They wore clothing that looked tattered and stained, though the stains were too dark to tell if they were dirt, grease, or something else. And their faces. When the first of them stepped into the faint halo of light from the arches, the driver's breath caught. The face was pale, skin drawn tight. The mouth stretched into a fixed grin that looked carved into the flesh. The lips cracked and raw, eyes wide and glossy like they'd been varnished. The others looked the same, different in features but identical in expression. They were all smiling that awful, permanent smile. And as they came closer, the driver realized he recognized one of them. Not from his life, but from earlier that night. It was one of the silent customers inside the McDonald's, the ones eating slowly in the booths. He fumbled for the door handle, unsure whether he meant to get out or lock himself in. But when he looked toward the building, the door was open now. Just a slit of darkness where the glass had been. From inside, the faintest movement, a shape shifting just beyond the threshold, tall and still, watching. The driver's pulse thundered in his ears. He tried to convince himself this was a nightmare, but everything felt too sharp, too clear. The cool metal of the keys, the faint ache in his stomach from the meal, the scent of fries still clinging to his skin. A sudden gust of air hit him. Though the night was windless, it carried with it that smell again, warm grease, overripe meat, and something metallic like rust or blood. It came from the direction of the arches, and with it came a new sound, a faint squelch, like something being kneaded by wet hands. The driver turned the key again, and this time the car roared to life. Relief surged through him, but it lasted only a moment. The fuel gauge, which had been just above empty earlier, now read completely full. The odometer numbers flickered wildly, changing faster than they should, as though they were spinning toward some unreadable number. He didn't care. He threw the car into reverse, but when he looked in the rearview mirror, the field was gone. In its place, more road, wet and black and stretching endlessly into the dark. He slammed on the gas, tires squealing, and the McDonald's shrank in the rearview. But no matter how far he drove, the golden glow didn't fade. The building seemed to hover at the edge of vision, never closer, never farther, always just there. His stomach twisted suddenly, a deep cramp that made him grip the wheel tighter. Sweat beaded at his forehead, the ache growing sharper until it felt like something was moving inside him. He swerved slightly, biting back a groan. The pain spread upward, into his chest, into his throat. For a moment, he thought he was going to vomit. He pulled the car over, flung the door open, and staggered out into the road. The thing that came out of his mouth wasn't vomit. It was a thick, greasy lump, pale and slick, that hit the asphalt with a wet sound. It twitched once, like it was alive, then went still. Steam rose from it in the cold night air, and the smell. The smell was exactly the same as the food inside the McDonald's. He stumbled backward, gagging, and when he looked up, the road ahead was gone again. The golden arches were back, closer now, their glow impossibly bright, staining the air around them with a sickly yellow haze. The silhouettes were gone, but he could feel he wasn't alone. Something was behind him. He turned slowly. Standing less than 10 feet away was the cashier, their pale face still frozen in that smile, their eyes locked on his. But their uniform was different now. It was stained dark, almost black in places, and their hands were wet, dripping something thick that pattered onto the road. In their right hand, they held a paper bag, plain and crumpled. "Orders ready," they said softly, their voice lower now, almost intimate. The driver shook his head, backing away, but the cashier stepped forward, holding the bag out. A smell leaked from it, stronger than before, overpowering and suffocating. He couldn't breathe. The edges of his vision began to darken, the hum of the arches growing louder until it was all he could hear. And then, without thinking, he took the bag. Inside was another burger, unwrapped, still steaming. The patty glistened under the light, the bun soft, the smell intoxicating despite the fear clawing at him. His hands moved without his permission, lifting it toward his mouth. The first bite sent a jolt of warmth through his body, flooding him with something like euphoria, drowning out every instinct screaming for him to stop. He chewed slowly, savoring it, his fear melting into something heavier, slower. When he finished, the cashier stepped closer, their smile wider now, almost splitting their cheeks. "Now," they said, "you can stay." The road was gone. The night was gone. Everything around him was golden light and the faint murmur of voices, dozens, maybe hundreds, whispering the same words. The end of the road is never the end. The driver blinked. He was sitting in a booth, his booth. The red vinyl was cracked beneath him, the table sticky under his hands. In front of him was a tray with another burger, another bag of fries. Around him, other customers ate in silence, their faces pale, their smiles unbroken. Somewhere far away, rain began to fall again. The driver didn't know how long he had been sitting there. Time didn't seem to work the same way inside this place. The burger in front of him was always fresh, always warm, steam curling lazily from the patty. The fries never cooled, never lost their crispness. But he hadn't taken another bite since the moment he realized the others in the booths weren't simply customers. They were fixtures. Every one of them had that same hollow-eyed stare, that waxy skin, that carved smile. Their hands moved slowly, lifting food to their mouths in mechanical precision. None of them looked at him, yet he felt their awareness, like heat on the back of his neck. The air in the restaurant had changed. It was thicker, harder to breathe, and the golden light from the overhead bulbs seemed brighter, harsher, as if it were trying to bleach every shadow away. The hum from the arches outside resonated through the walls, rattling faintly in the glass, vibrating the table under his hands. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey at first. It felt like he'd been sitting for days. When he finally pushed himself up, his head spun. The cashier was behind the counter again, still watching, still smiling, their eyes locked on him like a predator assessing prey. "I need to go," he said, though his voice came out hoarse and quiet. The cashier tilted their head slowly. No one leaves hungry. Something moved in the kitchen beyond the counter. He caught glimpses of it through the swinging door. A tall, shadowed figure working over something on a metal table. The wet, tearing sound he'd heard earlier returned, accompanied by a sharp, metallic clatter. A faint, coppery smell wafted into the dining area, overpowering the scent of fries. The driver's stomach twisted violently again, and this time it wasn't hunger. He clutched his side, feeling a deep, pulsing ache. It was as though the food he'd eaten earlier was still inside him, not digesting, just sitting there, growing heavier. He stumbled toward the door, each step harder than the last. When he pushed it open, the world outside was wrong again. There was no parking lot. Instead, an expanse of tiled floor stretched endlessly into darkness, lit only by the glow from the McDonald's behind him. In the distance, he could make out shapes, rows of booths just like the ones inside, stretching on forever. Figures sat in each one, all identical in posture, all smiling, all eating. The hum was louder here, vibrating in his bones. He turned back toward the doorway, but it was gone. The McDonald's behind him had vanished, replaced by more booths, more diners. The golden arches hung in the air above it all, suspended without supports, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. He walked forward, though he didn't remember deciding to. The diners watched him now, their heads turning in unison as he passed. Their smiles widened slightly, revealing too many teeth. The air smelled heavier here, thick with grease and something else, rot hidden beneath sugar and salt. One of the diners spoke as he passed, voice dry and cracking, like unused vocal cords scraping together. "It's always warm," they said, holding up a fry that seemed to steam endlessly. "Always fresh, always here." He kept walking. The booths never ended. But eventually, in the distance, he saw something different. A counter, much like the one from before, but this time the figure behind it wasn't the cashier. It was taller, thinner, its uniform hanging loose over its frame. The name tag was blank. Its face wasn't right. The skin was smooth where a mouth should have been, and its eyes were dark, wet pits that reflected the golden light. It gestured to him with one long, glistening hand, and without thinking, he approached. The air grew hotter the closer he got, the hum deepening into a throb that shook his ribs. The figure reached beneath the counter and brought out another paper bag. This one was wet with grease, the stain seeping through in an uneven, pulsing shape. When it set the bag down, the driver heard something move inside. Slowly, like breathing. He stepped back, shaking his head, but the figure leaned forward, pressing the bag toward him with both hands. He could smell it now, stronger than before, clinging to his skin, seeping into his clothes. It smelled like the burger, but beneath that there was another note, a raw, living scent that made his stomach churn. "You eat," the figure said, though its mouth never moved. The voice came from somewhere behind him, from the diners, from the air itself. "You eat and you stay." The driver's hands lifted without his permission, fingers closing around the bag. The grease was hot, almost burning. His pulse raced as he opened it, the smell flooding his head until he felt dizzy. Inside was another burger, but this one was different. The patty twitched. He dropped it instantly, and the thing hit the tile with a wet smack. It moved, limbs unfolding from within the bun, pale and jointed like a spider's, but covered in something soft and fleshy. It scrambled toward him, clicking wetly on the floor. He turned and ran. The booths passed in a blur, the diners now watching openly, some standing, their heads following his every move. The hum was deafening. The arches loomed larger ahead, their glow spilling across the endless tiles. He reached them, and for a moment, there was nothing but golden light. Then he was outside again. The parking lot was back, the rain falling in sheets, his car waiting where it had been. He didn't question it. He threw himself inside, the keys turning instantly this time. The engine roared, and he tore out of the lot, tires hissing on the wet asphalt. In the rearview mirror, the McDonald's shrank, the arches dimming. But only slightly. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty. He didn't know where it led. But he couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how far he drove, the end of the road was still waiting. And somewhere inside him, the heaviness remained. The road should have felt like salvation. The rhythmic sweep of the wipers, the cool night air rushing through the cracked window, the sound of tires on wet asphalt. These should have been reminders that he was free. But every mile only deepened the wrongness pressing against him. The golden arches might have vanished from the mirror, but their hum lingered, low and constant, vibrating somewhere deep inside his chest. The stomach heaviness was worse now. It wasn't hunger, and it wasn't sickness. It was movement. Every so often, he swore he could feel something shift inside, a faint crawl beneath his ribs, like whatever he had swallowed wasn't just sitting there. It was trying to find a way out. He drove for hours, or what felt like hours. The road never changed. No exits, no towns, no signs, only the slick ribbon of asphalt stretching ahead. His fuel gauge still read full, unwavering no matter how far he went. That alone should have terrified him, but he didn't have the strength to process it. His head was heavy, his thoughts growing sluggish, the hum drowning out everything else. Eventually, a shape appeared ahead, a faint glow, just barely cutting through the mist. His chest tightened. No, it couldn't be. But as he got closer, the outline became clear. A familiar building, low and squat, crowned with two golden arches pulsing faintly against the night. He slammed the brakes, the car skidding slightly on the wet road. His breath came fast. The McDonald's sat just ahead, the neon open sign flickering, the parking lot empty except for his own car, parked neatly in one corner, though he was still sitting in it. He killed the engine, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles ached. The rain had stopped again. The world outside was still and thick, like the air before a storm. He told himself he wouldn't get out. He would stay here until morning, whatever that meant in this place. But the hum grew louder, and the heaviness inside him shifted again, harder this time, like a knock from the inside. A thin, greasy smell drifted into the car, even with the windows closed. Warm, familiar, irresistible. His mouth watered before he could stop it. He glanced at the building. The door was open now, just a slit of golden light spilling into the dark. Inside, he thought he saw movement, a shadow crossing the glow. The first bite came before he realized he had moved, not into the building, not to the counter, but to his lap. A paper bag sat there, plain and crumpled, grease blooming across its bottom. He didn't remember picking it up, didn't remember opening it, didn't remember the burger now in his hands. It was perfect. Perfect smell, perfect warmth. The bun soft and giving beneath his fingers. He took another bite, and another. The hum swelled with every chew, vibrating his teeth, flooding his mind with a thick golden light. When he swallowed the last mouthful, The heaviness in his stomach didn't fade. It multiplied. His skin prickled, the hair on his arms rising. Something inside shifted again, stronger this time, pushing upward, pressing against his lungs, his throat. He doubled over, gagging, clutching the wheel for balance. The first sound was a wet tear, not from his throat, but from inside his chest. He could feel it, muscle and tissue stretching, straining, making way. His vision swam. His mouth opened in a silent scream, but what came out wasn't a voice, a hand. Small at first, pale and slick with grease, fingers tipped with soft, rounded nails. It pushed between his teeth, forcing his jaw wider. Then another followed, and another. They gripped the edges of his mouth, pulling, making space. The pain was blinding, but he couldn't move, couldn't fight. Something else was in control now. His eyes blurred with tears as a head emerged, small and perfectly round, skin pink and unblemished. It looked like a doll's head at first, smooth, featureless, until the mouth split open into that same awful carved smile. The eyes snapped open, glossy and unblinking. It crawled out of him slowly, wetly, dragging itself over the steering wheel. Its limbs were wrong, bent, too soft, the joints folding backward as it moved. By the time it was fully out, the driver's chest was heaving, his shirt clinging to his skin with a mixture of sweat and something thicker. The thing turned to look at him. It tilted its head, and when it spoke, its voice was the cashier's. Order complete. It dropped to the floor, landing with a wet slap, and crawled toward the open car door, though he hadn't opened it. Outside, the golden light from the McDonald's spilled across the asphalt, brighter now, almost blinding. Figures waited in that light, tall and still, their smiles wide. The creature paused at the edge, then turned back to him one last time. "You're part of the menu now," it said, and then it was gone, scuttling into the glow. The driver sat frozen, unable to process the words. The hum had grown so loud it was almost a roar, and beneath it, he could hear the whispers again. Dozens of voices, hundreds, all repeating the same phrase. The end of the road is never the end. And in his stomach, in the place where the heaviness had been, something else began to move. The driver didn't remember starting the car, didn't remember pulling away from the golden light. But now the road was under him again, wet and black, stretching endlessly into the dark. The hum was still there, pulsing in his bones, making his teeth ache. But now there was something worse. Soft, rhythmic movement inside his stomach, like the shifting of a living thing getting comfortable in its new home. He gripped the steering wheel harder, willing himself not to think about what had just crawled out of him. But the smell still lingered in the car, thick and greasy, clinging to his hair, his clothes, his skin. The air seemed heavier with every mile, harder to breathe. The road should have been empty. But up ahead, in the glow of the headlights, shapes began to appear. At first they looked like people walking along the shoulder, but as he drew closer, the details came into focus. Pale skin stretched too tightly over their bones, smiles carved deep into their faces, eyes blank and reflective like glass. Their heads turned as he passed, watching him in perfect unison, their necks bending too far to follow his movement. None of them walked toward him. They didn't have to. In the rearview mirror, the golden arches were back, faint at first, then brighter, closer. He pressed the gas pedal to the floor, but the road didn't change. The arches grew brighter still, their light swallowing the dark, bleeding into the mist until the horizon itself glowed that sickly yellow. His chest burned now, Every breath felt wrong, too shallow, too wet. And then the whispers returned, louder, clearer, like they were right next to his ear. Eat, stay, serve. The words were layered with other sounds, sizzling, tearing, the wet slap of meat hitting a counter. The wheel jerked in his hands, the car veering toward the side of the road. He fought it, but his arms felt weak, like the strength was being pulled from them. The headlights caught something in the ditch, rows of paper bags, hundreds of them, piled high and glistening with grease. Some were moving, twitching faintly in the rain. He slammed the brakes, heart pounding, and when he looked up, the McDonald's was there again, not behind him, not ahead, surrounding him. The golden arches hung impossibly large in the sky, curving overhead like the ribs of some enormous beast. The building's walls stretched out in every direction, doorways leading to nowhere, windows showing scenes that didn't make sense, diners eating in rooms that bent at impossible angles, counters floating in black space, kitchens where the workers had too many arms, each one chopping, slicing, grinding without pause. A shadow moved in front of his car, the cashier, still smiling. But now the uniform was gone, replaced by something slick and dark that clung to their body like skin. Their hands dangled at their sides, fingertips dripping a slow, steady trail of grease that steamed when it hit the ground. "You're ready," they said, voice low, each word vibrating in his bones. He shook his head, whispering no under his breath, but the movement inside him grew stronger, harder. Something inside was trying to push out again. He clutched at his stomach, nails digging into his shirt. The cashier stepped closer, and with each step, the world bent around them. The parking lot stretched and warped, the painted lines curling into spirals. The air thickened until it felt like oil clinging to his skin. "You've eaten enough," they said. "Now you serve." Pain exploded in his gut. He doubled over, a scream tearing from his throat. His vision blurred, but he saw them, figures emerging from the doorways, from the glowing mist, from beneath the arches, all smiling, all carrying trays. The smell of fresh burgers filled the air, thick and choking. He fell forward onto the wet asphalt, gasping. Something sharp and wet burst through his skin, tearing up from inside. His vision swam in gold and red as his body convulsed. Fingers, too many fingers, slid free from his abdomen, followed by something slick and pale that dragged itself into the light. It was him, or something shaped like him. The face was almost identical, but the smile was wider, deeper, cutting up into the cheeks. Its eyes were black and glossy, its skin coated in a thin sheen of grease. It looked down at him, then at the cashier, and nodded once. The cashier placed a paper hat on its head, the kind McDonald's employees wore decades ago. "Welcome to the team," they said. The new thing, his double, walked toward the building, joining the other workers moving behind the counter. Some of them looked human, some didn't. All of them were smiling. The driver tried to move, to crawl away, but his limbs were heavy, his strength draining with each breath. The arches above pulsed once, twice, and then the golden light swallowed everything. When it faded, the parking lot was empty. The road stretched ahead, quiet and wet. And somewhere, deep in the kitchen of the McDonald's at the end of the road, a new worker took his place behind the counter, ready to greet the next lost soul who wandered in. "Welcome to McDonald's. What can I get you tonight?"